Hi, you're tuned in to Mind Matter with Jannat. Over time, I intend to converse with a diverse group of individuals across various professions and age groups. The idea is to have meaningful conversations concerning an array of topics, including mental health, with a strong focus on creating an impact. Keeping in mind that it is Pride Month, I'd like to welcome our very first guest, Shannon Matthew. Shannon, would you like to tell us a little bit about yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Jannat, for having me here. So I am Shannon Matthew. I'm a queer feminist activist, and I work in the nonprofit space, and I do advocacy for queer rights, for mental health awareness, for sexual and reproductive rights. And yeah, I'm happy to be here.
So, diving right in, how are gender identities and sexualities different? What's the importance of all these terms and what do they mean?
So gender identity, to put it very plainly, is what you identify as. So it's very much about yourself and it's removed from your relationship with anyone else. And sexual identities or your sexual orientation is referring specifically to who you're attracted to, sexually or emotionally or romantically. And we hear a lot of these terms, like a lot of the gender identity and sexual orientation terms kind of sometimes being used interchangeably. And that's not really the case because your gender identity doesn't dictate who you're attracted to. So your gender identity and your sexual orientation are completely independent of each other. And we're all familiar with these terms because the abbreviation used for the queer community is LGBTQIA+. And I'll just go a bit into what each of those letters signify. Yeah. So the L it's lesbian, gay, bisexual, trans, LGBTQ, yes. And then Q is queer or questioning, I is intersex, and A is asexual. And then the plus kind of signifies the fact that our understanding of gender identities and sexual orientations are constantly expanding as more people in the community are experiencing their lives. And so that plus signifies the constantly growing community and what those labels and identities really are. Yeah.
So could you elaborate on the intersection of queer people and mental health, especially amongst today's youth?
Right. So that is quite a vast question. So I'm just gonna start off by saying that everyone has their own personal experience with mental health and everyone has their own mental health struggles. Mm-hmm. And those struggles are guided by how you experience the world and the kind of life you lead and the kind of experiences you have. For queer people, especially queer young people, those struggles can often be amplified because in addition to the general stressors that you face, there's an added level of stigma and discrimination you face as a queer person. And when you're a young person, and as you're figuring out the world, there are just a lot of questions that you have and a lot of struggles you have. And for most people, some things in their life are absolutely sure and immutable. But with queer young people, there's a certain aspect of their identity which is constantly being questioned, which is constantly being attacked. Yeah. So that really adds another layer to the kind of mental health struggles that you would face.
All right. Lastly, since we are at a time where COVID has been around for so long, how would you say lockdown has impacted the mental health of those young queer people that you've just spoken about?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I mean, with the lockdown, with the pandemic, it's kind of thrown everyone's plans in disarray and there's just a lot of uncertainty anyway. And the kind of spaces that you can occupy, physical or otherwise, are really limited. And for a lot of queer young people, even those, the limited safe spaces are even further limited because So for, queer people who are, constantly facing pushback from society, from their family, from their institutions, the few safe spaces that they've been able to carve out are also being attacked. So for a lot of young people, they are living with their families, they are living at home. And considering that Indian society is still catching up with their understanding of queer people and their acceptance of it, for a lot of young people, their home is not a safe space.
Yeah.
And that can become a huge problem because um, the safe spaces that you've created for yourself are often, with your found family or your friends. And to kind of suddenly have that contact cut off, it amplifies the struggles you face because you're suddenly existing in a space where you can't truly be yourself. So, with all the struggles that come with the pandemic and the lockdown are just really amplified and really exacerbated because you have, again, like this added layer of also not being able to be yourself fully because you're afraid that your family might not accept you. You might face, discrimination, and there's just a lot of uncertainty that queer young people face.
All right. For those who are struggling through any sort of mental health issues and who are in this community, what do you think their way of getting help is? And what could they do to get that help?
So, I mean, one of the immediate support systems that you can create for yourself are your friends and maybe family members who are supportive of you. So you kind of work on kind of maintaining contact with these support systems. But outside of that, I think I recommend this to everyone, and especially for young people who are queer, is to seek mental health support. And that mental health support can also that support can kind of be given in a lot of ways. So one is obviously reaching out to your immediate support system or your support network, but it's also maybe looking at online communities with people who are in similar situations as you. So there's a certain sense of solidarity you have. There are queer support groups which are forming. There are peer counselors, and if you have the means, you can also seek therapy. And now actually it's really great. There are a lot of queer friendly and queer affirmative mental health service providers. And so what queer friendly therapy or queer friendly psychiatrists essentially are therapists or organizations which are open and are friendly towards queer people. But there's also queer affirmative mental health, which is essentially coming from therapists and psychiatrists who have the skills and who have the understanding of what are the issues that young people face as a result of them being queer. So they're equipped with the skills and the abilities to treat a queer young person's issues effectively. So there are a lot of options. Most of them are currently online, but if you look, you will find something. Yeah.
All right. Something seen amongst many young queer people is internalized homophobia. What exactly is it and how can one overcome this?
Right. So homophobia is essentially this irrational fear that people have against homosexuality and homosexual people. And it's essentially a manifestation of the prejudices and the intolerance that kind of society has against homosexual people. And internalized homophobia is often occurs when you unconsciously or consciously integrate these fears into how you perceive homosexual people. And though internalized homophobia can be seen in both queer and heterosexual people, it especially causes a problem when someone who is queer has this internalized homophobia, because it often causes you to lash out at the cognitive dissonance in your brain, because on one hand you identify with homosexual or queer identities, but society and the people around you have constantly told you that this is deviant, it's abnormal, it's not okay.
Yeah.
So internalized homophobia is essentially that. Yeah. And your question about how to overcome it, I don't think I'm equipped to answer that. I think it takes years of unlearning, which happens, I mean, through your interactions with people. It happens through kind of interacting with people who are queer and just reading a lot and learning in therapy.
Mhm.
But one thing about internalized homophobia is that you can overcome it.
Yeah.
And I think that's why the term homophobia is also a bit misleading, because phobia makes it sound like it's a medical or a clinical condition, but it's not. It's a ism. It's like sexism. It's like racism. It's very much a social phenomena. And with any like social phenomena, anything that you can learn, you can unlearn as well. So yeah.
Thank you so much. Do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share?
Yes, so I know we've spoken about the mental health struggles and homophobia and a lot of negative experiences that queer people have, but I just want to say that I think the world right now is far more hopeful than it was when I was growing up. I mean, I definitely see the younger generation having a lot more knowledge about gender identities and sexual identities. Like when I was growing up, this was not information that was readily available. There
Yeah.
is, I think, looking forward, that there is a lot of hope and there is a lot of understanding for queer people. So I think, as bad as things may be, I hope that they do get better, and it seems like it will.
Thank you so much, Shannon, for your time and the information that you have shared with us today. I do believe that there is help available for whoever needs it, which is why we have shared relevant links at the end of this video, whoever needs to reach out to somebody. Lastly, the future does look hopeful, and hopefully soon enough, there will be enough loving communities for everybody.